Happy Memorial Day. Welcome back. It is Monday, May 29th, 2023, and probably our most loaded birthday and event video yet. Like I say, we're right in that hot spot of the World 600, Indy 500 races. So a lot of events and quite a few birthdays for today, too, with a lot to talk about there. So let's hit the ground running. Excuse me. On this day in 1970, Al Unser would win the second of his four Indy 500s, and he'll be featured here in a minute because it's also his birthday today. So I don't know how many 500 winners won on their birthday, but there's one that we know of, Al Unser Sr. in 1970. On this day in 1983, Tom Sneva wins his first and only Indy 500. Of course, there was controversy throughout the race as near the end, Al Unser Sr. was leading, and his son Al Jr. was running behind him, blocking Sneva. Sneva eventually got past both of them. Al Jr., I believe, was 4 or 5 laps down at the time, but Sneva had a much faster car that day and was able to win. Rookie Teo Fabi won the pole, led several laps, but had engine problems. So overall, it was a pretty good race. I've seen highlights of it. Looks like, I really liked the mid-'80s, late '80s IndyCar series. It was a lot of fun. 1988, Rick Mears wins his third Indy 500. I know there's some scoring issues at the end. I think Jim Crawford was originally awarded second, and then they dropped him down to fifth. And this was about the time that the Buicks were starting to really gain endurance. They were able to last the full 500 miles. They had power, but then they were starting to have reliability issues. And this was the first year that Buick was really showing, hey, not only are we fast, but we can go 500 miles. It'd just be a few years later that John Menard would also develop his own V6 engine, much like the Buick V6 engine, and they would end up, having some really good runs there in a few years. Also on this date in 1988, Darrell Waltrip won the Coke 600. And this was probably one of the most brutal NASCAR races that you'll watch in terms of how many drivers got hurt. There was a lot of crashes in this race. You're right in the middle of the Hoosier-Goodyear tire war. Holy smokes, there was tires popping left and right all day just because Goodyear had to withdraw. So Hoosier was there, but their tires weren't that good, and there was still Goodyear tires available, but they weren't that good. They were slower. I recommend you go watch it. Find it on the YouTube. It's one of those races that I can watch over and over. Not because of the crashes, but just because of the way the race was delivered and all the stuff that happened in it. I mean, yeah, Harry Gant got a broken leg. Neil Bonnet went to the hospital with, I think he hurt his shoulder. Ricky Rudd, no, that was a week before in the Winston. Ricky Rudd was driving hurt that day because of an injury from the previous week. Rick Wilson hurt his shoulder in a crash. Buddy Baker was in a crash that ultimately led to his retirement because of a head injury. So Dave Marcus, I think, ended up having to go to the hospital for checkup after a hard hit. It was just, cars were just getting demolished in this race. But there was a lot. Bud Moore broke his leg on pit road after getting hit by his car, Brett Bodine driving. So it was a rough race that day. 1994, Al Unser Jr. wins his second and final Indy 500 in what would be his last Indy 500 for the kart-sanctioned version, because in the following season, because in 1994, Al Jr. and Emerson had those Mercedes-powered cars that were wicked fast. 1995, they didn't qualify. And then, of course, 96 was the split, so they didn't come back for a while. At least Al Jr. didn't. And then Jeff Gordon won the Coke 600 for his first career NASCAR Cup Series win. So I think it's kind of funny there. One day, one person wins their last and one wins their first for their respective sanctioning bodies for that event. 2005, Jimmy Johnson wins the Coke 600. This race currently has the record for the most cautions in a Cup Series race at 22. More than 25% of this race was ran under caution. But it was still a good race, much like the 88 when it's one that I can go back. Even though Johnson wins, and I'm not a big JJ fan, I still like the fact that there was a lot of other... And that's the thing, when you have these races that have a lot of cautions, it gives other drivers opportunities to get up front, and that's what happened. And there's a lot of drivers here that got up front that otherwise wouldn't have. It's also Martin Truex Jr.'s first Cup Series top 10 as well. Also on this date, Dan Weldon won the Indy 500 for his first of two in 2005. Danica Patrick becomes Rookie of the Year and becomes the first woman to lead laps at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway during a race. Also in 2011, Dan Weldon wins his second and final Indy 500. So it's funny, his only two Indy 500 wins came on this date. Of course, he passed J.R. Hildebrand coming out of turn 4 after J.R. brushed the wall and broke his suspension and was limping to the line. Kevin Harvick won the Coke 600 same day. Similar situation. Harvick running second on the last lap. Coming out of 4, Dale Jr. leading, runs out of gas. Harvick passes him to win the race. So both cars that day that took the white flag in the lead were the National Guard cars of J.R. Hildebrand and Dale Earnhardt Jr. Neither one of them took the checkered flag in the lead. So kind of strange coincidence. Both had problems coming out of 4. And then in 2016, Alexander Rossi wins the 100th running of the Indianapolis 500. And Martin Truex Jr. wins the Coca-Cola 600 in the most dominating performance ever in that race, leading 392 of 400 laps. Wow, that's incredible. So we're 6.5 minutes in. You've not seen a card yet because we've had to cover so much racing. So let's get to the cards. One birthday that I thought I had cards for, and I couldn't find any. I know I've got some, but I couldn't find them in my Legends box. Born on this date in 1922, passing away in 1964 because of a crash at Riverside, California, Mr. Joe Weatherly. Joe was a two-time Cup Series champion, 62 and 63, but was killed in a crash at Riverside early in the 64 season. Part and partial because Joe did not like to wear the shoulder harness. He strictly wore a lap belt because his thought was if the car ever caught on fire, he needed to be able to get out as quickly as he could. Ultimately, that decision cost him his life. So let's start with a couple IndyCar legends, and we've spoke of both of these IndyCar legends already. And I didn't even write the year down. Let me look and see if I have it here. Actually, no. I've got the wrong date for this guy. So we're going to skip this guy till we get to his birthday here in a few days. Born on this date in 1939, he passed away in 2021. Mr. Al Unser Sr., the driver that I was speaking of was Tom Sneva. Looks like his birthday's June 1st, so we'll talk about him in a couple days. But Al Unser Sr., of course, here he is driving for Penske. He's always a good fill-in role near the end of his career, driving for Rick Mears there. When Rick got injured in 1984, 1985, Al Sr. Split time between two Penske cars, driving this car on the ovals and this car on the road courses for Mears. That helped him win the 1985 IndyCar Championship. He'd be part-time for the next couple years. There's some more from 86, 87-ish. There's a car he won the Indy 500 with in 1987, his fourth and final win at Indy. 1988, you can tell the gold car. He ran it a few times. And then he'd end up being with the Menard team near the end of his career. See if it has anything. There's the Menard's car that he drove near the end of his career. Mostly just at Indy. So we're going to go to our next birthday. Born on this day in 1950. Longtime independent driver Jimmy Smutt Means from Huntsville, Alabama. Drove his Fame 52. Everybody remembers him for his Alka-Seltzer car. This is probably my favorite card of Jimmy. I really like that card. It's super cool. I think Jimmy still has that hauler. There's a channel called Stapleton 42 that has a really, really good interview with Jimmy. Of course, Scene Vault Podcast has done a good interview, as has Dale Jr. Download, where he always talks about. Then at the end of 91, Jimmy lost the Alka-Seltzer sponsorship. Then he just, basically funded his own team with whatever sponsors he could pick up along the way. Here he's just got generic uniforms on. Then shut his team down in the 94 season. And in 95 he became crew chief on the 15 car at Bud Moore Racing for Trickle and Dallenbach. So there's the famed Alka-Seltzer car. You've seen the chrome numbers in the previous picture. And a lot of teams have done throwbacks of this, so that's super cool. Like I say, after he lost the Alka-Seltzer sponsorship, he just, ran plain cars or pick up sponsorship. Hurley Limo helped him a lot in 93 and 94. Race Fans Unlimited, which was, I can't remember what that was. That was something that was going on at the time. So up next, and we'll just do these in order of birth date. Born on this date in 1955. Just met this guy the other day, Mr. Ken Schrader. So Kenny started out in sprint cars, dirt cars, midgets, and so forth. I like this next card because it shows all the teams. Of course, this is 1995. All the racing that Kenny did: Cup and Busch and truck and dirt and midgets and quarter midgets and modifieds and anything that if Kenny's butt could fit in the seat, he'd drive it. So 91 through 94, I'm sorry, 90 through 94, Schrader had Kodiak sponsorship. Then Kodiak went away to the 41 team. Budweiser hopped on board for a few years. Then he left that team, the 25 team, at the end of 96 to go drive for Andy Petrie Racing for a few years on the Skull car. Then in 2000, he hopped in the M&M's car for MB2 Motorsports. So M&M's, Pedigree, which is one of the Mars companies Kenny was sponsored by. Then he hopped over to the BAM team. I believe that was in 2003 that he took it over. 2004, thereabouts. They went sponsorless for a while. They picked up Swans, one of the companies owned by Swans, Red Baron. Then he went to drive for the Wood Brothers for a couple seasons, a couple full-time years and a part-time year with Little Debbie and Air Force and other rotating sponsors. So now we have the cars. So we have a Kodiak car. This was the original inception of it in 1990. Look at the font. Then they changed the font style in 91, 92. Then they changed the paint job and went back to the original 25. But that's hard to see, so I don't know why NASCAR let them do that other than the fact that they had it outlined in white. Thank you, Assets Racing, for printing a Bud car. I thought we were going to have to do another airbrushed car, but you have the uniform and the car, so thank you, Assets Racing. Of course, Skull was on his car when he went to Andy Petrie Racing. Then they changed it up just a little bit. But during this season where they changed it up, they also ran the different colors. Of course, these are all going to be censored. But like if you had the winter green, spearmint, whatever, they ran the different flavors of their car. Here's the only M&M's car I could find, and it was the vote for whatever color M&M's. I guess I lied. We had the Halloween and the patriotic M&M's as well. Kenny raced in the Busch Series some, so there's his Busch team. He either ran usually 15 or 52. So he had an AC Delco car. There's one of those Skull cars, but there's one of his Busch cars, Oakwood Homes. We said he was a Busch Series driver. There's his Busch Series card with the AC Delco and Oakwood Homes. He also ran in the Truck Series. So there's the Truck Series Kenny Schrader for AC Delco and then also Federated Auto Parts. And we got one more birthday to go. Born on this date in 1957. A lot of people said he was very tenacious as a driver, but they said he was also somebody you did not want to mess with in the pits. Probably physically one of the toughest drivers ever. Mr. Bobby Hamilton. Of course, Bobby passed away back in 2007 of head and neck cancer. Bobby came into the Busch Series in the late 80s, driving for what would become Fillmore Racing. I think it was Fillmore at the time. But TIC Financial Systems was one of their sponsors, so he drove that for a few years. Moved up to the Cup Series in 91, driving for TriStar. Country Time Lemonade was their sponsorship. He drove for that team for a couple years. Then in 93, he bounced around after getting released in late 92 from the 68 car. I'm sorry, he was released early 93 from the 68 car. He drove for a few teams in 94. The Moroso team picked him up on a part-time schedule. Then in 95, Sabco picked him up. He started the year in just kind of a blank car with a couple of small Kindle decals, but then they went full-time as a sponsor, and he drove that car for most of the year. Only had one top 10, but Richard Petty must have seen something because in 95, they picked him up in the STP car, and he drove to the first win for Petty Enterprises since 1983 at Phoenix in 96. Drove for that team for several years. Then in I guess about 3 or 4 years. Then in 98, went to the Kodak team, the Morgan McClure team. Drove there for a couple years. Had one win, not a lot of success. Then in 2001, went to the 55 team of Andy Petrie Racing with the Square D. Of course, you got Schneider Electrical as one of their other sponsors. So these guys that we have today have driven a lot of different cars. They were definitely journeyman drivers. Hey, there's Terry Labonte. Just now noticed that. 91 Rookie of the Year in the Cup Series, Bobby Hamilton drove this car, the Oldsmobile. They switched to Fords in the middle of 92 because Fords had some type of advantage. They were just a faster car. We talked about driving the Moroso car part-time in 94. 95, there's the Kendall car. I always liked this sponsorship. It was a low-key, nice-looking car. Then 95, that was the paint job that the Petty group was running in 95 when Hamilton went over. If I said 96, I meant 95. But 95 is when Hamilton started at the Petty team. Then in 96, they had a slew of paint jobs celebrating 25 years of Richard Petty Enterprises, or Petty Enterprises and STP. So, including the original STP car. Then you had that famed, this was based off the Dodge Charger. Then the 200th win car from the mid-80s for Mike Curb. Then after that year was over, they went to a more modern design. The flames added a little flare to the nose. So it was definitely a fun time there. Kodak car, they didn't do much with it. They just added this little rainbow swoosh and the word Max. But they also, time of special paint schemes and promotions, Kodak Advantix, whatever that was, Kodak Advantix system. So this is a time that digital film was, digital cameras were coming in, so you're starting to lose film at this time. And Kodak wouldn't be in the sport much longer after this. Like I said, we switched over to 55 car, Square D, and then there's a Square D with the Schneider Electrical. So this is the longest birthday and events video I've done yet. I have not stopped talking for 17 minutes. I'm almost winded, guys. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video today. We got, as I'm filming this, we're getting ready to sit down and watch the Xfinity Series race and the Cup Series race. So I'm going to be glued to the couch for probably the next 6 hours. So anyway, thanks again for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you come back tomorrow. Thinking about doing our flea market finds from Sunday, but we're going to wait and see. So thanks again for watching. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. Enjoy your Memorial Day. Spend time with your family. Have a great cookout, and we'll see you tomorrow.